The first thing people noticed about the new farm girl wasn't her clothes or her accent. It was how quietly she worked. Every morning, before the sun fully rose, she walked across the fields with steady steps, boots worn but clean, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back with care. She didn't complain about the cold mornings or the heavy buckets. She didn't ask for attention. She just did the work, calmly, patiently, like someone who had learned early that effort speaks louder than words. Her name was Emily. To the small farming town, she was an outsider, and outsiders always stood out. A group of local bullies noticed her within days. They watched from a distance at first, whispering and smirking. "Who does she think she is?" one of them said. "Trying to act tough on a farm." Another laughed. Emily heard them, but she didn't respond. She kept her eyes forward, her hands busy, her posture steady. Not because she was afraid, but because she'd been taught something different. One afternoon, as the dust hung in the air and the animals settled down, the bullies decided quiet confidence looked like weakness. They stepped into her path. Mocking words followed, then careless laughter, then a shove that sent her basket tumbling into the dirt. Emily lost her balance and fell to one knee. The farm went quiet. For a moment, everyone expected tears, or anger, or fear. Instead, Emily took a slow breath. She stood up, brushed the dirt from her jeans, and looked straight ahead. Not at them, but past them. "My dad always told me something," she said softly. The bullies leaned in, amused. She continued, her voice calm but steady. "Kindness doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're strong enough to stay in control." They laughed louder. What they didn't realize was this. Emily wasn't alone. She was never alone. And the man who taught her those words, the man who raised her to stay calm under pressure, was closer than anyone imagined. By the end of the day, this farm wouldn't just remember a confrontation. It would remember a lesson about respect, about quiet strength, and about the kind of power that never needs to shout. And that lesson was just beginning. Emily hadn't chosen the farm because it was easy. She chose it because it was honest. The land stretched wide and open, bordered by old wooden fences and fields that smelled of soil and rain. Mornings began early, long before most of the town woke up. The work was physical, repetitive, and demanding, the kind of work that tested patience as much as strength. For Emily, that was the point. She believed hard work built character. It grounded people. It reminded them who they were when no one was watching. The farm owner, Mr. Harris, had noticed her on the very first day. She didn't talk much. She listened carefully. When given instructions, she nodded once and followed them exactly. No shortcuts. No excuses. If she made a mistake, she fixed it quietly and moved on. "Not many young people work like that anymore," Mr. Harris had said one afternoon, watching her repair a loose fence plank. Emily had simply smiled. What the town didn't know was that this farm wasn't her first choice. Emily had lived a very different life before this, one filled with travel, attention, and expectations she never asked for. People used to recognize her last name before they saw her as a person. Conversations often felt shallow. Compliments didn't feel earned. So when she came to this quiet town, she introduced herself as just Emily. No stories, no explanations, no famous connections. Viewer note: this story is a fictional, dramatized narrative created to highlight values such as humility, respect, and integrity. Any resemblance to real people or places is purely intentional for storytelling purposes. Emily wanted something simple, to be judged by her actions, not assumptions. But small towns have their own rules. Outsiders are watched, differences are questioned, and silence is often mistaken for weakness. The local bullies had grown up together. They knew the land, the people, the shortcuts. To them, the farm wasn't a place of effort. It was a place of control. Anyone new disrupted that balance. Emily disrupted it without trying. She worked harder. She complained less. And she never reacted to insults. That unsettled them. "She thinks she's better than us," one of them muttered one evening. "She won't even talk back," another said, irritated. What they didn't understand was that Emily had learned discipline long before she arrived here. Her father had taught her that true strength wasn't about dominance. It was about restraint. That dignity showed most clearly when tested. That walking away from provocation wasn't losing. It was choosing peace. Those lessons weren't theoretical. They were lived. Emily carried them with her every day on the farm, in the way she stood, in the way she spoke, in the way she stayed calm when others tried to pull her into conflict. She didn't see the bullies as enemies. She saw them as people who hadn't learned yet. And while the tension around the farm slowly grew, Emily remained steady, unaware that events were already moving toward a moment that would force everyone, including herself, to confront what respect truly meant. Because sometimes, staying quiet isn't avoiding the storm. Sometimes, it's standing strong until the truth arrives on its own. And that truth was closer than anyone expected. By the third week, the tension on the farm was no longer subtle. It lived in sideways glances, in voices that dropped when Emily walked past, in the way laughter stopped too suddenly. The work continued as usual, but something underneath it had shifted, like the air before a storm that hadn't yet broken. Emily felt it. She felt it when she carried feet across the yard, and footsteps slowed behind her. She felt it when conversations changed direction the moment she entered a room. Still, she kept going. Same pace, same focus, same calm expression. That consistency bothered them more than words ever could. One afternoon, as the sun burned low and long shadows stretched across the field, Emily was asked to move supplies from the storage shed to the barn. It was routine work, heavy but manageable. She loaded a wooden crate onto a small cart and began pushing it along the gravel path. That's when they stepped out. 3 of them. They didn't block her completely, not at first. They walked beside the cart, pretending to help, pretending to joke. Their smiles didn't reach their eyes. "Must be hard work for someone like you," one of them said casually. "You sure you can handle this?" another added. Emily didn't answer. She focused on the path ahead, hands steady on the cart. Her silence only encouraged them. "Why don't you ever talk?" one asked, leaning closer. "Think you're better than everyone here?" Emily stopped the cart. Slowly, she turned and looked at them. Not with anger, not with fear, but with clarity. "I'm just here to work," she said evenly. "Same as everyone else." For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the wind moving through the fields. Then one of them laughed. "See," he said to the others. "Always calm, always polite." He nudged the cart lightly, testing. The crate shifted. Emily tightened her grip but said nothing. That was the moment it happened. The nudge turned careless. The cart tipped just enough for the crate to slide off and hit the ground. The sound echoed across the farmyard, sharp and sudden. Emily stumbled back, losing her balance, and went down to one knee. Time slowed. A few workers nearby froze. No one shouted. No one ran. It wasn't dramatic, but it was wrong, and everyone felt it. Emily stayed still for a second, catching her breath. Then she stood up. She brushed dust from her jeans and bent down to lift the crate back onto the cart. Her movements were controlled, deliberate. No shaking hands. No raised voice. One of the bullies smirked. "Careful," he said mockingly. "This place can be dangerous." Emily looked at him. "My dad taught me something about moments like this," she said quietly. They leaned in, curious despite themselves. She continued, her voice calm but firm. "When someone tries to make you small, it's usually because they're afraid of something in themselves." The smile faded from his face. She didn't wait for a response. She adjusted the crate, gripped the cart, and pushed forward, past them. No threats, no insults, no drama, but the message landed. Around them, the farm had gone quiet again. Not with fear, with awareness. Something had crossed a line, and everyone knew it. What no one realized yet was that this moment, this small, controlled conflict, had already set bigger things in motion. And the next step wouldn't come from shouting. It would come from truth. The farm had never felt so still. Even the animals seemed to sense it. Horses paused mid-step. The chickens clucked softly as if in caution, and the cows stopped chewing, heads raised as if listening. The sun had dipped lower, casting long, golden shadows across the fields, and for a moment, it felt as though time itself had slowed. Emily walked steadily across the yard, pushing the cart carefully. The crate was secure this time, and her focus was unwavering. Yet the eyes following her were impossible to ignore. The bullies lingered, pretending to busy themselves with other chores, but their attention was undivided. Every movement she made, every turn of her head, every quiet adjustment of her sleeves was observed, analyzed, whispered about. "She's different," one whispered to the other. "Yeah, she doesn't react like anyone else," another replied. "It's unsettling." It wasn't fear that Emily sensed from them. It was confusion. Confusion mixed with something heavier. A subtle awareness that maybe they had underestimated her. And she was right. For all their mocking, all their pushing and prodding, they hadn't realized that Emily carried with her more than quiet strength. She carried her upbringing, lessons instilled by someone who understood power, respect, and restraint in ways the town could not imagine. It was then that the sound of an engine broke the stillness. A vehicle approached the farm slowly, deliberately. The bullies instinctively straightened, eyes narrowing toward the road. Emily glanced up, calm as ever. A tall man stepped out. Casual clothes, simple shoes, sunglasses shielding his eyes from the low sun. His movements were unhurried, deliberate, almost meditative. There was nothing intimidating in his demeanor. Yet everything about his presence demanded attention. The bullies froze, unsure how to react. "Who?" one began, his voice trailing off. Emily didn't answer. She simply continued pushing the cart, her steps steady. The man didn't rush toward her. He didn't yell. He didn't even call out. He simply walked alongside, observing quietly, his gaze gentle but knowing. The farm workers, previously scattered around the yard, had begun to notice. Whispers rippled through the crowd. "Isn't that? I think I've seen him somewhere before." No one was certain. Recognition flickered in the eyes of a few, but the moment was delicate. The man's presence shifted the energy, without demanding it. There was no intimidation, only awareness. The bullies, for the first time, seemed unsure. Their usual confidence, built on mockery and small-town dominance, faltered. Their laughter had died down. Their jabs had been silenced, not by confrontation, but by the calm gravity of the new arrival. Emily stopped the cart near the barn. She adjusted the crate one last time and stepped back. The man approached her slowly, careful to give her space. The sun caught the edges of his hair, highlighting a calm determination in his eyes that seemed familiar to those who had recognized him from faraway screens and stories. He didn't speak immediately. He didn't need to. His presence alone carried a message: observation, patience, and understanding. The bullies shifted awkwardly, unsure whether to challenge him or themselves. Finally, the man spoke, not loudly, not forcefully, but clearly, with an authority that didn't rely on shouting. "Everything okay here?" Emily looked up at him, nodded slightly, and smiled. "Yes, everything's fine." The bullies exchanged uneasy glances. They had expected a scene. They had expected anger. But here was someone who didn't meet aggression with aggression, who didn't scold, berate, or humiliate. Instead, he offered attention, assessment, and calm presence. And that was more powerful than any shouting match could have been. Around them, the atmosphere shifted. The farm workers, initially silent, began to relax, sensing that the tension had changed. This was no longer about Emily versus the bullies. It was about observation, recognition, and understanding. Everyone felt it. Even the animals seemed to sense that the balance had shifted in favor of something larger than conflict. Emily's quiet confidence combined with the man's presence created an unspoken lesson. True authority does not shout, it watches. True strength does not strike, it observes. And sometimes, the most profound moments occur without drama, without anger, and without violence. The bullies didn't run. They didn't challenge. They just looked, unsure how to process what they were witnessing. They realized that underestimating someone could lead not to immediate consequences, but to a slow, undeniable awareness of one's own misjudgment. And somewhere deep in that moment, Emily knew she hadn't been alone, not for a second. Her father's lessons had been alive in her actions. The man beside her embodied those lessons now, showing, without a word, that respect, patience, and quiet vigilance could change the atmosphere more than any confrontation ever could. The sun dipped further. Shadows stretched long across the fields. The farm had gone quiet once more, but this time it wasn't tense. It was expectant. Something was about to happen, a revelation that would reshape not just Emily's day, but the understanding of everyone who had been watching, silently, from a distance. Because sometimes, strength doesn't announce itself. Sometimes, it simply arrives, and everyone else realizes it at the same moment. The tension that had held the farm in a quiet grip all afternoon was about to change in an instant, though not with shouting or conflict. The tall, calm man who had arrived, moving with quiet confidence, finally stepped closer to Emily, giving her a reassuring nod. He wasn't here to intimidate, and he wasn't here to make a scene. He was here to observe, to support, and to teach a subtle but powerful lesson. "Everything okay?" he asked again, voice calm, low, steady. "Yes," Emily replied, adjusting the crate. She glanced at him briefly, then back at the path she was pushing along. She didn't need his validation, but it was comforting to know he was there. The bullies, however, were frozen. They had expected anger, confrontation, perhaps a show of force. Instead, they were met with calm authority, the kind that doesn't yell but is immediately recognizable. The air seemed to thrum with the silent power of someone who had walked through more challenges than they could imagine, and had always maintained dignity. Then it happened. One of the workers, a woman who had been tending the chickens nearby, whispered softly, almost in disbelief, Is that Keanu Reeves?" The word spread quietly, like sparks across dry grass. Heads turned, eyes widened, whispers escalated, but no one dared speak loudly. The bullies stopped mid-step, the smug confidence fading as recognition struck. "Keanu Reeves," one of the bullies muttered under his breath, his voice betraying both fear and awe. "The actor?" "Yes," another worker confirmed, her voice trembling slightly with excitement. "I've seen him in movies. He's real. He's here. Right here." The tall man's gaze softened as he noticed the sudden shift. The bullies had been sure of their power. Now they realized they had been arrogantly testing someone far beyond their assumptions. But Keanu didn't raise his voice. He didn't point fingers. He didn't scold. He simply looked at Emily, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right?" he asked, sincere, his tone calm yet imbued with authority. Emily nodded. "I'm fine. Thank you." "Good," he said, then straightened, addressing the entire group without a hint of anger. Sometimes people act out because they don't understand the value of respect, patience, and dignity. That doesn't excuse their behavior, but it does show what they need to learn. The bullies, realizing the weight of their misjudgment, lowered their heads. They had expected an explosive confrontation, a humiliation, maybe even retaliation. Instead, they faced quiet authority, a calm presence that communicated far more than words could. Keanu turned his attention to the farm workers, the townspeople, and finally, to the small crowd that had gathered. "Strength isn't measured by how loud you are, or by how much you push someone down," he said. "It's measured by how you respond when challenged, by how you protect those who can't defend themselves without losing your composure, by how you teach others through your actions, not your threats." Emily looked up at him, realizing in that moment that all the lessons her father had taught her, the quiet resilience, the patience, the self-respect, were alive in this man standing beside her. Not only did he embody those lessons, but he amplified them for everyone around to see. One of the bullies finally spoke, his voice barely audible. "We didn't know." Keanu's eyes softened. "I know," he said, "and now you do. That's why it's important to act with integrity, even when no one is watching. Respect isn't earned through fear or mockery. It's earned by how you treat people, consistently, every day." The bullies shifted uncomfortably. Some looked ashamed, some confused. No one argued. No one challenged. The lesson had landed without violence, without humiliation. It had landed because the truth was quietly undeniable. Then Keanu took a step back, giving Emily space. "You did well today," he said to her. "You stayed calm, focused, and dignified. That's the kind of strength that inspires more than fear ever could." Emily smiled, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. "Thank you," she said. Keanu glanced at the farm, the workers, and even the bullies, now subdued. "Remember," he added, "the world will often test your patience and your character. How you respond will define who you are, not what others say about you." And with that, he walked slowly toward the vehicle, leaving the farm bathed in late afternoon light. But his presence lingered, an invisible imprint on everyone who had witnessed the events of the day. The bullies would think twice before underestimating someone again. The workers had learned a lesson in quiet leadership, and Emily had been reminded that her father's teachings were not just her own. They were a legacy of strength and dignity. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the farm settled into calm once more. The shadows stretched long across the fields, but now they carried a different feeling: respect, awareness, understanding, and the quiet knowledge that true authority doesn't need to shout. It simply stands, watches, and teaches. The moment had passed, but its impact would last far longer than anyone had expected. The farm, once tense and uncertain, now carried a quiet sense of reflection. The sun had dipped lower, painting the fields with golden light, and every shadow seemed softer, longer, and filled with a calm that hadn't been there before. The bullies, once brash and self-assured, now moved with hesitation, their confidence replaced by thoughtfulness. They no longer mocked, no longer pushed boundaries, and their laughter had gone quiet, not out of fear, but because they had glimpsed something far greater than themselves. Emily worked steadily, finishing the last tasks for the day. Every movement, lifting buckets, tending the animals, organizing tools, was deliberate and controlled, as if each action carried the weight of the lesson just witnessed. She felt the presence of the tall man, Keanu, still lingering, not physically, but in the awareness he had inspired. His calm authority, his quiet insistence on respect, had shifted the energy of the farm. Mr. Harris, the farm owner, approached Emily quietly. His eyes were warm, a mixture of pride and realization. "You handled that well," he said softly. "Not just the cart, not just the bullies, everything. You stayed calm when most people would have reacted. That's strength." Emily nodded, brushing her hands together. "I just tried to remember what my dad taught me," she said. "Strength isn't about winning arguments. It's about knowing when to stand firm and when to stay calm." Mr. Harris smiled, a deep, genuine smile. "And it's clear that lesson isn't just yours to keep. You've reminded everyone here what it means to act with dignity." Around them, the bullies worked in silence, helping with chores without comment. There was no need for enforcement or punishment. Their eyes, when they glanced toward Emily, held something new: respect, perhaps even a quiet shame for underestimating someone they thought was weaker than themselves. Keanu's earlier words echoed in Emily's mind. Strength isn't measured by how loud you are, or by how much you push someone down. It's measured by how you respond when challenged. Every movement she made, every interaction she had, was now a reflection of that truth. The bullies, the workers, and even passers-by could see it. True leadership didn't demand attention, it inspired it. As the sky shifted to deep orange and purple, Emily paused, looking across the fields. The animals had settled, the tools were organized, and even the wind seemed softer. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, not from being recognized, but from having acted with integrity. That, she realized, was the kind of power her father had always spoken about, the kind that didn't seek applause, didn't demand validation, but quietly influenced everyone around. Even the bullies couldn't ignore it. One of them, the leader of the group, approached Emily hesitantly. I didn't understand before," he said, voice low. "We thought you were, I don't know, just new and weak. But you handled it differently. Calm, strong, real." Emily nodded, her calm smile unwavering. "It's never about making anyone small. It's about being the best version of yourself, even when others try to test you." He paused, thinking, "I guess we have a lot to learn." "You do," she agreed softly. "But so does everyone, in some way." That simple interaction carried the weight of the day. No shouting, no humiliation, no threats. Just honesty, humility, and understanding. And it was far more impactful than any punishment or confrontation could have been. By the time the sun disappeared below the horizon, the farm had transformed. The atmosphere was no longer charged with tension, but filled with mutual respect. The workers carried themselves differently. The bullies had learned, in a subtle but undeniable way, that their assumptions could be wrong, and that respect and dignity were far more powerful than mockery or force. Emily looked toward the path, where Keanu had left. She knew his presence had been a reminder of her own lessons at home: discipline, calmness, and quiet confidence. But the real victory wasn't about him. It was about what she had carried forward into the world herself. And that was the lesson that lingered long after the truck had driven away. True leadership doesn't need to dominate. True strength doesn't shout. Respect is earned quietly, consistently, through actions that reflect patience, integrity, and care. The farm, now bathed in the soft glow of twilight, stood as a testament to that truth. And for Emily, it was more than just a place to work. It was a place where strength, respect, and quiet leadership weren't just taught. They were lived. Tomorrow, the bullies might try again. Life might test her patience. But she was ready. Not with anger, not with intimidation, but with the calm assurance that true power always shows itself in the way you treat others, and in how you remain true to yourself. The sun had set completely, leaving a soft, violet hue across the farm. The air smelled of fresh earth and hay, carrying the calm of a day that had been tested and transformed. The once tense farmyard now breathed quietly, as if exhaling after a long moment of revelation. Every shadow, every fence post, every path carried the subtle reminder of what had unfolded. Strength isn't loud. Leadership isn't flashy. Respect isn't demanded. It is earned, quietly, every single day. Emily stood in the middle of the yard, taking in the calm. She could see the workers packing up tools, with renewed purpose. Even the bullies, who had tried to challenge her just hours ago, moved with hesitation but also a strange sense of humility. They weren't running, they weren't hiding, and they weren't boasting. They were reflecting, processing, and learning. It was exactly as her father had taught her. The impact of your actions matters far more than the noise you make. She remembered the day's lessons, not just from the confrontation, but from everything that had happened before and after. From the way she had maintained her composure to the presence of the man who had arrived quietly but carried an undeniable authority. Every piece fit together, forming a mosaic of understanding that would stay with her and everyone who had watched for a long time. Strength is subtle, she realized. It's in staying calm when provoked. It's in continuing your work with focus while the world tries to distract or intimidate you. It's in treating people with dignity, even when they have tried to knock you down. Leadership, she understood, doesn't always come from titles or power. Sometimes it comes from showing others, through your actions, the kind of behavior that deserves respect. And sometimes, the people who need the lesson most will be the ones least expecting it. The bullies had learned that today. They had assumed weakness, tried to test it, and instead encountered dignity, composure, and quiet authority. Their lesson wasn't shouted at them. It didn't come with threats. It came with observation, with reflection, and with a clear demonstration of true strength. Emily smiled softly. She didn't feel triumphant or boastful. She felt grounded. She felt steady. The world around her had shifted, not because she had sought to change it, but because she had remained true to herself. And that, she realized, was the greatest power of all. This day at the farm wasn't just about Emily. It was about everyone who witnessed it, everyone who learned from it, and everyone who would remember that real respect and leadership cannot be faked. They are shown in how we treat others, in our patience, and in our willingness to act with integrity when it matters most. And as Emily walked toward the barn, finishing her chores, she felt the echo of a powerful truth. Appearances can be deceiving. Assumptions can be wrong. But consistent kindness, calm authority, and respect for others are never mistaken. They resonate. They inspire. They leave a lasting mark. For those watching this story today, the lesson is clear. Speech balloon comment respect if you believe true strength comes from kindness and integrity. Round pushpin share where you're watching from. Let's show that a community of respect and quiet strength exists everywhere. Seedling, remember, every day is a chance to act with dignity, to treat people fairly, and to demonstrate leadership without raising your voice. Emily's story, and the lesson of the farm, reminds us that real power isn't in dominance or force. It's in patience. It's in consistency. It's in choosing to act rightly, even when no one is watching. And sometimes, the world notices anyway. By staying calm, showing integrity, and demonstrating quiet leadership, Emily didn't just survive a challenge. She transformed the environment around her. The bullies were humbled. The workers were inspired. And the farm, once a place of tension, became a place of respect, reflection, and understanding. The moral is simple but profound. Never underestimate someone based on appearances. True strength shows itself in actions, not words. And respect, once earned, is far more powerful than fear or intimidation ever could be. As the stars began to appear above the farm, Emily took a deep breath, knowing that the lessons learned today weren't just for her, or even for the bullies. They were for everyone who witnessed them, for everyone who hears this story, and for anyone striving to lead with integrity in the world. Because at the end of the day, respect is quiet, kindness is powerful, and true leadership leaves a mark that lasts far longer than any moment of conflict ever could.